Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with a review for House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 3. This one's titled Second of His Name, and once again I'm joined by my friend Greg for this one.
Hey, how's it going?
So he's the, I guess, like Game of Thrones enthusiast, or a fan, coming at this show. So he knows a lot of the background, a lot of the material that's being adapted here for this show. And I'm coming at it. Of course, I've seen Game of Thrones, and pretty big fan of some of the stuff in that show. Definitely one of my favorite shows of all time. Yeah, so I guess I'm maybe a little more objective or critical because I'm not, fully versed on all the stuff kind of behind the scenes and the stuff that's going into this one. So with all that being said, I'll probably, ask Greg questions and stuff, and he'll be able to provide some more of the background. But yeah, so with that being said, let's get into this episode. So I'll just start off and say that I did like last week's episode better than this one. This one to me was a bit of a step down. I think I also like the premiere better than this one as well. Don't get me wrong though, there were some really great moments, especially without spoiling anything here at the beginning. But that end sequence was just incredible to watch, and we'll definitely talk about that once we get into spoilers. But yeah, so Greg, you want to share your kind of overall thoughts and maybe also kind of a brief synopsis of the episode here?
Yeah, so we get about a 3-year time jump from episode 2 to episode 3, meaning that Alicent and Viserys are now married. They have a son who is the titular character of the title of this episode. Second of his name. His name is Aegon. He's about 2 years old. Well, in fact, he is turning 2 years old. There is a kind of a massive celebration for his birthday. They're doing a royal hunt. And so that's kind of half of the episode. We get Viserys, everyone in the small council, attending this hunt in the Kingswood, which is basically just kind of a south of King's Landing, kind of in between King's Landing and, kind of the Reach, kind of in between that area.
Okay.
So there's this kind of massive royal hunt for the prince's second name day, his second birthday. So we see kind of all of that devolve, and now there's massive questions of is this child the new heir because he's the firstborn son of the king, and a lot of the lords of the realm, and specifically the ones who are at the celebration, are kind of just assuming that that's the case. They're not even, it's not even so much a question as is they're kind of just, it's the assumption. So that's kind of half the episode. The other half is we see the war in the Stepstones, which at this point 3 years, and it's this very kind of it's been this very arduous battle versus the Triarchy and led by Crabfeeder, and it's very clear that the Valerian forces, along with Daemon's Gold Cloaks, are quite taxed and are frankly losing the war. They were outnumbered to begin with, and that has only grown.
Yep.
And I think they've just struggled with kind of the tactics that the Triarchy has used, and so we kind of see that tensions are running high in the War Council in the Valerian camp, and so that's kind of the two halves of this episode that we're dealing with.
Yep. Yep. And how did you feel about this one compared to the previous two?
I probably liked episode 2 better, but I think this one was very good. I mean, I think what episode 2 had was, I think a lot of we were dealing with the issue of Viserys remarrying, and so we had the classic thrones. Otto has one opinion. Grandmaster Melos, Lionel Strong, Corlys Valerian. There was just kind of a lot of different politicking going on, and this episode was somewhat similar to that in that we're dealing with will Aegon be the next heir? But I think the difference between the two is that everyone's kind of just assumed that Aegon will be heir, and what we're dealing with more in this episode is kind of
Not as
Viserys
contentious.
yeah. Viserys' internal struggle. I mean, if there's any contention, it's really just with Viserys
Right.
himself
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
of whom he should, if he should appoint Aegon. And so we see this is more of kind of a relationship episode, character episode with it, with Viserys and Rhaenyra, um, of their relationship that's clearly deteriorated and is continuing to deteriorate, and also with Alicent and Rhaenyra a little bit as well. You can see that Rhaenyra is basically frozen out Alicent. Alicent is clearly still trying to mend the relationship, but um, perhaps it's we've gone past the point of no return here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I liked the episode. I thought it was good. Thought there's a lot of really good things to take away from it. But yeah, I mean, I think episode 2 for sure. Episode 1, hard to say. Just as we're setting it up,
Yeah.
it's just very different. It's very kind of
Yeah.
comparing apples and oranges. But I would say if gun to my head, I would probably pick episode 3. I'd go 2, 3, 1 probably in rankings. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I think they're all to me they're all kind of in the same. They're in the same kind of realm of quality.
No pun
Just
intended.
things here. No pun. Well, no pun intended. No. Although I wish I had intended. It works pretty well in this case, but yeah, I mean, I think they're all kind of in the same range for me. I don't feel like
Okay.
one's a massive step down, one's a massive step up. I feel like we're kind of dealing with similar quality here, just kind of nitpicks for what I prefer in an episode.
Yeah, and we're still very much in the introductory kind of stage of the show, right? And still setting things up. So, yeah, I definitely can see that. And you're right. Ultimately, I think with episode 1, it is such an introductory episode in a lot of ways. So it is kind of hard, like especially when once the season is done and we kind of look back on it. I think it'll be even more kind of perspective on that and saying, okay, yeah, that was very much an introduction episode. And
Yeah.
obviously we're in for a lot more in the next 7 episodes with this 10 episode first season. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it for the non-spoilers part then. We can't really go much further than what we have, and we do have a lot to talk about for this episode. So we'll give the spoiler warning now. I guess just the one thing is that the opening credits were the same as last episode. There was no change there. So not sure if that's going to continue or not. But yeah, so we'll give the spoiler warning now, and we'll go into some more of the details of this episode. So I just had kind of 3 or 4 kind of threads I wanted to follow, with this, and we'll kind of, discuss, several scenes probably within each thread, obviously, that we see throughout the episode. But the first one is just Rhaenyra's marriage dilemma, right? And this is very much a focal point of the episode, at least for Rhaenyra's side of it. So we get this kind of impression that everyone, including Viserys especially, knows it has to happen, right? Like knows that she has to get married, and this is just kind of the way it works, right? Now the only one who doesn't really hasn't considered it, or is very reluctant to even consider the idea, is Rhaenyra herself in this episode, and so. A lot of discussion about her finding a potential match. We see some, potential suitors. First being Jason Lannister, who kind of tries his best here. And then, so I'll just go over kind of some of the possibilities. So, Corlys' son, Laenor, is obviously suggested, and that's kind of a big one. And then the idea is also floated about her marrying her own baby brother, basically Aegon. But it does seem like there's also the option of Kristen Cole, which we see play out in this episode a little bit with those scenes. So yeah, I guess my question then to you, Greg, is what did you think of these scenes? Well, yeah, I guess we can start with Jason Lannister. What do you think of the kind of interaction there between him and Rhaenyra?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty on brand for Lannisters. A lot of arrogance,
Yep.
a lot of just very presumptuous. He's offering, he's presenting this marriage offer, but he's assuming she's going to say yes. It's not all that much of a question, for him at least. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think there's a great line Viserys has later in the episode where he says that his pride has pride.
Right. Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah.
perfect.
That was good.
But yeah, I mean, I think I thought that was a really good scene. But also, I thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, at first you hear him talking, and it's very clear what he's trying to do. But then it devolves into, oh, he's assuming she's just a princess. It's not like he's trying to assert himself as the her king beside her. He's assuming that she'll just be the lady of Casterly Rock, which I think was interesting. Um, but yeah,
Right.
I enjoyed him. Also, he has a twin brother, Tyland, who has replaced Corlys on the small council, who is played by the same actor.
Oh,
So
okay. I didn't notice
Yeah,
that.
I'm
Okay.
interested. Be interesting to see how that evolves over time. But yeah, I liked his introduction. Also, another one to point out. Well, I guess it's less kind of a proposal and more what Viserys had assumed that Lionel Strong was going to propose to him, but
Right.
he had mentioned Lionel Strong's oldest son, Harwin Breakbones
Yeah.
Strong, who we see briefly. We see a couple times, but kind of chiefly we see him when Rhaenyra is walking back, kind of the next morning after the hunt, after she's been attacked by the boar, and she's walking and she looks kind of to her left, and you see him kind of just like laughing,
Oh, okay.
um, But I think it's very much laughing and like, oh, this girl's interesting, like she's got something. Like it's not
Right.
like, oh, laughing at her, she's pathetic. I think he's intrigued, and I think as we start to learn more about his character, you'll see that is very much in line with him. He's a fighter. He's very, yeah. I don't know if he's bloodthirsty, but he's very much, he loves getting in a melee. He loves getting in a bit of a scrum. So I think that was very will foretell his character somewhat as we continue to see him. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think I think all the kind of marriage proposals floating around. I think you see some. Lionel Strong brings up Laenor Valerian, a very kind of
Yeah.
prudent choice. And then we see Otto Hightower bring up her brother as very much, well, perhaps in this version of Westeros that wouldn't go to the norm, but clearly it's for his own ends because, as we know, Aegon is his grandson. It's his Alicent, his daughter's son. So
Exactly.
you kind of see these different players in the small council. Lionel Strong has absolutely no stake in Laenor Valerian marrying Rhaenyra.
Right.
It really only serves to help the realm. It doesn't really help him. But of course, Otto Hightower, who you could argue an equally beneficial or prudent marriage choice, right? However, clearly it's to serve his own agenda of having his son, or rather his grandson, on the Iron Throne, and which would presumably um, afford him quite a bit more power.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think in the context of that scene too, he kind of frames it as, oh, like this kind of helps you make this. It kind of clears everything up, right? Because
Yeah,
if Rhaenyra marries Aegon, then you don't have the problem of naming one of them heir or whatever. Rhaenyra will just
yeah,
be, well, I guess not the queen, but like the king's um, wife, and so they'll both just kind of be there, and of course Rhaenyra will be able to kind of give input and probably have a lot of influence over him anyways as king. Um,
yeah, and
so
her children would then be in
right,
line for the throne as well.
right, exactly. So yeah, it was kind of a bizarre kind of suggestion, but like you said, I think it kind of tells more about Otto than anything else, that his kind of scheming, and we saw that last episode too, where he gets Alicent to go to Viserys and kind of plant the seed there. So yeah, yeah, and you said Otto's definitely is one of your standouts so far. I really like that character as well. I don't want to make like too many comparisons to Game of Thrones characters because we're only 3 episodes in, but he does seem kind of like the Littlefinger, I guess, a little bit, kind of in the way he's scheming here, and
Hmm.
definitely in it for his own end, kind of similar in that way. But yeah, So, any comments on Otto so far?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, very much Littlefinger in the scheming sense, a little bit of
Yeah.
Tywin Lannister, maybe. I mean, obviously, he does not have the power that Tywin Lannister had, but
Right.
just kind of in his approach. I mean, Littlefinger was a lot more jovial. He loved to make jokes. He loved to get under people's skin. Otto seems a little more calculated
Yeah.
than that. He's not. He's very a stoic, very placid character in that sense. But yeah, I think those are pretty apt comparisons. But I think he's kind of his own thing too.
Yeah.
We see, I believe it's in this episode, him talking to his brother, his older brother Hobart. I believe was that in this episode
I can't remember, but I do remember that
where
scene.
his
I
brother basically
believe.
said, yeah, his brother basically says, hey, look, man, this is all fine and dandy to celebrate his birthday right now, but he better be sitting on the Iron Throne when he's 16.
Yes, yeah, that's this episode.
Which I
Yeah.
thought was great because I thought it was great because it really just shows that Otto obviously he can throw around his weight as Lord Hand, as the hand of the king, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have a seat. He has no castle. He has no army. It
Right.
shows that he's clearly very ambitious and very intelligent, but his only power is derived from the king. He has no
Right.
power of his own. So I thought that was great, and I think just commenting kind of on the adaptation of the entire show, I think a lot of people were kind of musing before the show came out that, well, maybe they would just make Otto Lord of Old Town, Lord of the High Tower rather, and they would give him, and so they would kind of just cut out his brother and just kind of give him this ultimate power and to try to, you know, put him on the same level of a Corlys Velaryon or whomever, rather than just making him a second son of the Hand. And so I saw people saying that, just in the to cut out characters, to kind of trim a little bit of the fat. But I'm so glad they didn't because I think him being a second son makes him so much more interesting.
Right.
And also, it makes the dynamic with him and Daemon, both second sons, even more interesting. So I'm glad they didn't do that, just kind of as a side note.
Yeah, and going forward, I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that for sure. And I didn't want to forget to mention this, but I think we talked about it, but the look when you brought up that we get kind of some reactions when Rhaenyra's walking back, kind of covered in blood, and I wanted to point out Jason Lannister's reaction because I thought that was one of my favorite moments of the episode. So good, just his reaction. He like kind of looks a little repulsed, right?
Yeah,
When he sees Rhaenyra and kind of makes that face, and you just kind of get this impression like he wants this princess, right? And she comes back looking like this, and he's like, yeah. So I did really like that, and I like what the actors really is doing with that role. So hopefully we do see more of him, and like you said, if he's so is that actor that then is playing the another character, his brother, right? Is that what you said?
his twin.
Okay, yeah. So hopefully, yeah, we'll see more of him in the near future. That would be cool. So yeah, and then just the scenes with Kristen, if we want to go more into that, I thought, to me, I obviously you can see this connection, and they had been building this really since episode 1. When Kristen wins the jousting match. And he kind of like looks up to her, and she throws the was it like a reef or something like that, kind of like the custom tradition. But we see, I think, a little more of that, and to me, it makes a lot of sense the way that they're kind of framing Rhaenyra so far, and her kind of continuing to kind of rebel against the norms and the traditions of what people expect of her, and so it just makes a lot of sense that she's gravitating towards Kristen Cole, who didn't really come up in any of those conversations with Viserys and the Lords. It's not really a potential match in that sense of people thinking
Yeah,
about it. But to me, it's pretty obvious throughout this episode that if she had to choose, right here, right now, it would probably be Kristen Cole. So I just really like the way they're kind of that just made a lot of sense for Rhaenyra's character, and like these scenes were were really important, I'm sure, for what's to come. Now, I don't know. I kind of doubt that this is actually going to work out for her and that she's going to be able to be with him. I very much doubt that, but I don't doubt that she'll at least try. Especially, and we'll get to it, but especially in that last scene when Viserys says, "You can choose, right, who you want to marry." I think that definitely has some caveats to it in this sense. But yeah, so what do you think of
Yeah.
the Kristen Cole scenes? I think you like them, right?
Yeah, I thought they were great. I think I've seen several interviews with the two actors, and I think they just have really good off-screen chemistry. So I look forward to seeing how that translates to the show. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of a in terms of a marriage betrothal with the two of them, I think it's basically next to zero. Like,
Right.
there's kind of
Yeah.
two things. Being a Kingsguard, he can't marry, so he would have to
Leave. Yeah.
renounce his vows. Which at this point, it seems like that he's said it a couple times that basically his dream is to be in the Kingsguard. So that's one thing. The second thing is he's fairly lowborn, so I think Viserys is giving her the option, giving her the choice, but I think he
Right.
also expects her to pick someone of at least, a somewhat comparable station, somewhat comparable level of birth.
Right.
But I fully expect them to. I mean, I would not be shocked at least if they, if they have a little relationship on the side here, even if it's nothing formal. Um, I would not be shocked at all to see this progress romantically, even if they are not married by the laws of Westeros.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, those scenes were great. I mean, Kristen obviously says he owes everything to her, so I think we're seeing a massive commitment to her as a knight. But I think we're going to see this progress. That, man, maybe he'll be committed to her a little bit more, and on
Right.
a kind of more personal, intimate level. But I thought the scenes were great.
Yeah, and I really like the one line I think that he says, and Rhaenyra is trying to, kind of saying that, I can't remember the exact line, so I'm gonna kind of paraphrase, but I think she, talks about that she, doesn't really, she has no power to make decisions, and that, no one really cares what she thinks or whatever. But then Kristen makes the point of, well, I like you, got me into the Kingsguard. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so that I think is a big kind of connection there as well. That also might bring the two of them together. Like you said, either probably informally in the near future, especially if we only have like maybe two more episodes, a couple more episodes with this version of Rhaenyra. I'm sure we'll see that pretty soon, right? Um, Probably next episode. I would think if that's kind of what they're going for. Um, okay, so then the next kind of thread here is just Rhaenyra and Viserys. This relationship that it looked like last episode was kind of on the mend. Towards the end of the episode, it looks like they were, they had I think one or two scenes kind of together at the end there, and it just seemed like they were kind of coming together. They were finally talking about Queen Emma, right, her mom, and Viserys' wife, and her death, and kind of connecting there. And then, of course, he makes the decision to marry Alicent, which is, a huge breakdown of that relationship already. And so I think we still see that, of course, that she resents him for marrying Alicent. I think even in the episode it's mentioned maybe that, she obviously understands it and it kind of had to happen. But she does, him remarrying, but she doesn't understand, or she is not happy, that he chose Alicent of all people, basically her best friend. Um, and I think you mentioned on the offset too, that relationship with Alicent has also, been very damaged as a result. Um, so yeah, and then also, now we get this kind of, idea or this challenge to Rhaenyra, that Aegon will now supplant her as the heir to the throne, and so that's also another reason why this relationship has continues to falter, and that kind of plays out, of course, between them as well. So yeah, I don't know. What were your kind of thoughts on their relationship and kind of the dynamic between the two for this episode?
I think it was I think that was really kind of the focal point of the episode in a sense
Yeah.
was very much their relationship and I think we very much got that or is we have this kind of these massive arguments, this kind of rift between them throughout the episode. But by the end of the episode, Viserys kind of is able to reckon with kind of Rhaenyra and kind of able to empathize with her a bit because he basically chose who he wanted. I mean, Lena Valerian would have made the most sense, obviously, but he chose kind of who he had a strongest connection with at that point in time, and so he's kind of affording Rhaenyra the same privilege. But yeah, I mean, I think they had great interactions. I think one a really good dynamic in this relationship is that you can kind of see both sides. Obviously, in the context of Westeros, in the context of a medieval kind of royal family, you can understand both sides of her saying, "Well, that's not really. I don't think that'll make me happy." His side being, "Well, look, daughter, like this is kind of what comes with the territory.
Right.
It's very much having to marry and have children and keep up this royal line and keep up these appearances is kind of the tax on having this massive privilege, being having a dragon, having this kind of living in opulence and having this kind of very privileged life. The tax on that is you gotta marry, you gotta have kids.
Yeah.
So I think that you can kind of see both sides. It's not a situation where sometimes in Game of Thrones it was where we're not quite understanding one character's point, or we're saying, oh, that is completely beyond the it's completely beyond the pale or whatever. Like, this is very much, well, you kind of understand both sides, so you enjoy the back and forth a little bit more, and then once we see the resolution, it's a compromise. It's look, I'm not going to pick who you're going to marry, but you got to pick you can pick, but you got to pick someone, and I think that's kind of the best, the best way to the best kind of conflict. How do I put this? The best kind of progression of a conflict is we're seeing both sides. We kind of empathize with both positions, and then by the end, we get a compromise that we think kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's kind of really the epitome of this relationship. The two of them is that yes, they have disagreements, but at the end of the day, they're both reasonable people who are not doing things, who are not making decisions out of haste, or they're not just making decisions like a Damon character who kind of does things because he wants to stir the pot. He wants to annoy people, and frankly,
Yeah.
these people are making decisions because based on their kind of own happiness and how they think. And frankly, Viserys, what's best for the realm. So I think the relationship has been good. There's, I think every is interesting, whether it's an argument, whether it's more of a kind of a resolution to an argument. So I think I've been very, very, very interested in these scenes.
Yeah, and I think both actors do a great job. Millie Alcock and Patty Constantine. I think they play it really well, especially this last scene in the episode. I thought was really well acted. And yeah, so I agree. I really like this relationship so far, and you're exactly right. You really can see both sides, to this. And obviously, the whole thing, kind of in the background, or the whole thing driving all this, this challenging stuff for Viserys and Rhaenyra is that, Queen Emma dies. Like, that's such a huge event, where, a lot of this stuff, I'm sure Queen Emma would have talked to Rhaenyra, and we even see that, actually, now that I say that, in that first episode where she talks to Rhaenyra about kind of like the way things are, for a queen, and
Yeah,
that she'll have to marry. So, that's something that I'm sure Queen Emma would have talked to Rhaenyra about, and had these discussions and stuff with, and obviously, she's gone, and then they can't have that, and of course, Allison is not, she's not going to talk to Allison. So yeah,
yeah,
I think that,
yeah, and
obviously you can see
yeah,
that.
yeah. Just as a little addendum to what I was saying, um, there part of the way Viserys makes this argument is he's saying, look, if you want to be queen, you have to have a line. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
you can't. You're like he's making he's very much appealing to her own desires, saying,
Mm.
and I'm not even saying he's not doing it maliciously. Frankly, he's just doing it because
Yeah.
it's correct. It's sound reasoning. But he's saying, look, you can't just be a queen with no husband and no kids. Like that is just a very tenuous position to be in. To have no heirs, to
Right.
have no security. Like the realm very much does not trust a woman queen, but they're definitely not going to trust a woman queen if she has no children.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that also was pretty sound reasoning on his part. And I think that shows Rhaenyra, like, obviously part of the episode is that she kind of just thinks her dad's going to replace her.
Right.
And he's trying to tell her, look, no, that's not the case. And that,
Yeah.
excuse me, making that argument very much furthers his, his attempts to kind of assuage her fears of this by saying, yeah, like I want you to marry, but partially because you got to have heirs,
Right.
rather than just kind of selling her off to the highest bidder,
Right.
securing House Lannister's support, which also I think as an interesting point, the House Lannister also has a fairly large fleet, and right now the largest fleet in Westeros is in the Stepstones.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting dynamic as well.
Yeah.
If that were to play out in some form, but yeah, so I think that really you can see Viserys. He's a pretty good guy. He's got his own problems, but he very much is looking out for his daughter and definitely believes that she's fit to rule.
Right, and yeah, and so that's the kind of the big end to that scene, is that he said, I think he says, I had wavered, but I have decided now that Aegon will not supplant you as heir. You are the heir. You're gonna stay that way. And so yeah, I think that was a big kind of reveal. Rhaenyra looked very surprised by it. I was kind of surprised by it. But to me, I don't know. I still don't think this is, yeah, it's kind of a good thing to say, and I think in that moment he does genuinely believe it. But just to me, and again, I don't know, where we're going here. I know you probably do, so I don't know how much you can comment on this. But to me, I just don't see this continuing. I don't think that Viserys is going to be able to get away with this, with Rhaenyra staying heir. I just think that it's not going to last long. I think there's just too much pressure, from the lords and the people who kind of matter, I guess, in a sense, to name Aegon as heir. So, anyways, I don't know. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Is there any way you could comment on that without any spoiling of where we're going?
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay, yeah, that's
But
what I
I think,
thought.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
clearly, without imparting any of my knowledge on this conversation, clearly, look, when you have this many lords of the realm who believe that Aegon should be heir,
right.
it very much is a kingdom ruled. It's feudalism, right? The
Mhm.
king is the king is number one, but the king is number one because the lords are not banding together and dethroning him.
Right.
The power resides with having lords on your side, and so clearly that unless that's resolved, that is going to prove to be a very large hurdle for Rhaenyra to overcome. But we'll see. I think
Yeah.
I think very much. Look, we're seeing Lannister and we're seeing Hightower, two very big houses. But look, I'm sure there are also houses that will support Rhaenyra. I mean, this is just kind of the beginning of this. But yeah, the implication from this episode is that many lords in the realm assume Aegon. But
Right.
you never know; things can change.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We can leave it at that. And so I guess just kind of a point, kind of off of that, is I just wanted to kind of focus on Viserys too, because he just gets so much focus. I'd say this is probably Paddy Considine's best episode, just in terms of his screen time and what he's given here. And I think he does a really great job. We just see him struggling so much with the politics of everything, and I think he says that in one line, enough politicking, and
Yeah.
obviously I think he's drunk at that point, but we see him very much struggling with this and just not wanting to kind of deal with all of it, right? And it just seems like Rhaenyra is making it more complicated. Like he already has the stepstones, all whole thing going on, and obviously a lot of other things, and it's Rhaenyra that is, or sorry, did I say Daenerys? Or did I don't know. But Rhaenyra,
No, I
it's
think you're good.
okay. It's Rhaenyra then, who's further complicating this and causing him even more stress and all this stuff, with her kind of the whole marriage thing, and obviously her being the heir, continuing to be the heir. So I just thought from this episode and from what we saw, that quote from Damon last episode about Viserys, being king, not being his strongest trait, and you can really see that in this episode. It's just he's not really, built for all the politicking and all these kind of maneuvers and stuff. He, very much seems like, kind of this like nice guy. And it doesn't seem like that really works, when you're on the throne. So yeah, I don't know. What you have any kind of thoughts on him throughout this episode and that kind of struggle that he's having?
Yeah, and I think he's also having his own physical struggle too. I mean,
Right.
we see in episode 1 that he has this wound. It's clearly festering. It's clearly spread to his hand in episode 2, and now he's lost basically 2 fingers. I think on his left hand or one. I'm not sure which hand. I think it might be his left. Basically, they're like completely non-functional now, unfunctional. So we see, obviously, and that clearly has. I would not be surprised if that has something to do with his drinking too, to try to numb that pain. But yeah, so now he's dealing with these kind of political turmoil and his own physical ailments, and things are not going too well for him right now. He just wants to have a happy family and go on a hunt and have Rhaenyra kind of accept his new wife
Right.
and his new family, because we should mention Allison's also pregnant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's incredibly pregnant. So that baby we're probably going to see that baby in episode 4.
Yeah.
Almost certainly. So things are not going too well for him, and but yeah, Paddy Considine does a great job. His performance in this episode, definitely. Yeah, I think he definitely got the most meat that he's had to work with in this episode. But yeah, he's been great. Really, I didn't know what to expect, just because
Yeah.
I had seen him. He's in the Cornetto trilogy, right? Hot Fuzz, at The World's End, and Shaun of the Dead. He's been in that. He's been in kind of other lighter things, more with a comedic twinge. But he's been excellent.
Yep. Yep, for sure. And so I don't I don't know how I don't know if you, I guess, can answer this, but my kind of thought, I think it was, so episode 1 when we saw the wound of Viserys, I didn't, I was like, okay, it's it's a wound. But then episode 2, the way his kind of finger looked, it kind of looked like a bit of like a grayscale kind of thing that we saw in Game of Thrones. So I guess like I'm kind of throwing it out there. I don't know if you can really answer that, or if that's kind of where we're going. But that's what it looked like to me, just as someone who's kind of unaware. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see where that goes. But
Yeah,
obviously,
I'm not
Grayskull's
entirely sure. Yeah,
very serious. So
yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think not,
okay,
just because it starts as a wound from the throne, and I think the fingers look like that because they're dead, right? The skin is dead because they were trying to have the maggots
right,
eat away
yeah,
the wound, and clearly that didn't work. Big shocker there, that didn't work.
right,
But
yeah,
I don't think it's Grayskull. I'm not. Also, I think it's a couple ways you could go with this. You could say, oh, wouldn't the Maesters know it's Grayskull? Wouldn't we be talking about this? You could also say, well, maybe it was newer. Maybe they didn't really know what it was. But I don't think it's Grayskull. I don't actually know this for a fact. I'm not. I'm not sure if they really talk about it in the book that much. I think it's more
oh, okay,
that he just has kind of an ailment. I don't think it's really referenced as grayscale. Of course, show could go a different way with that, clearly. But
Right.
I'm kind of thinking it's not grayscale, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I just thought I'd mention that because that was my first thought when I saw that in episode 2, and then but I guess in Game of Thrones, like, it spreads very fast, so if it was, it probably would have spread a lot further by now, especially with these time jumps that
Yeah,
we've had.
yeah,
So yeah. Okay. So then, of course, we haven't talked about it, but the stepstones. Let's just go into all of that. So yeah, obviously, I think you mentioned that in kind of a bit of a synopsis of the summary. Is that Damon and Corliss are struggling, which I was kind of surprised at. But then once you see, kind of the geography of this, where they're fighting and everything, it's clear that, the crab feeder and his soldiers, what is it, at Kragus Drahar? Drakar?
Kragus, Drakar, or Drahar. I think it's Kragus, Drahar. Yeah,
Okay. So him, crab feeder and his soldiers, obviously have the advantage here, geographically and, like you said, numerically, I think, as well. We see how they go and hide in these caves, and then Damon goes down, and I think we see it at the very first scene of the episode, actually. Damon comes down with the dragon, and he can't really do much. He kills, I think, a few people, but he
yeah,
can't,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I thought that was a great way to explain.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, why can't Damon just go in with Caraxes and just torch them?
right.
Well, because they're going into the cave. So I thought that was
Yeah.
a really smart way of explaining that.
Hmm.
Because we want to see battles. We don't want to just see dragons torching armies all the time, which is fun.
Yep.
But we do want to see a bit of
A bit of
an
a fight.
actual battle between soldiers, because Battle of the Bastards, it's great, and there's no dragons, so we can.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, most battles in Game of Thrones are great,
Yep.
and there's no dragons, so we want to see both. And so that I thought that was a great way of explaining that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And then, of course, we saw as well that they had these kind of missiles or catapults set up. So, these ships that were coming in are just getting, downed, almost immediately.
Yeah,
And so, obviously, it all just goes to show that they have a big advantage, right? The crab feeder and their soldiers. So, of course, this pressure is kind of, and we don't, so we get that scene with Damon at the beginning, and then we really don't actually see the stepstones until the end kind of sequence. So the only time we
yeah,
really hear about it is through, Viserys, and so we get this kind of idea, this constant pressure, on Viserys. Obviously, there's a time jump. We don't quite feel the length of that because they've jumped time, but it's actually, like you said, years that this has been going on. So these pressures that Viserys is facing to intervene and provide them aid because they're losing, and it looks bad on the realm, or sorry, looks bad on him as the king, and shows this weakness, and also this Corlys wants to shore up his side of things, and he's or was an important member of the small council and all that, or still is, but. Um, so this eventually comes to a head, and we have this conversation with Alicent, Viserys and Alicent, and it seems like she's the one that kind of finally gets through to him, and gets him basically to send the aid to Daemon. What did you think of this? Because this was one scene that I wasn't a huge fan of. I just thought this was a little, just this very brief conversation with Allison. I think she just asked this like question of like, well, is it better, or that the crab feeder is defeated, or that he has the stepstones? And then all of a sudden, he just kind of seems to change his tune and provide aid. So what do you think of this one? I wasn't a huge fan.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't really feel it one way or another
Or am I
too
looking too close into
strongly.
it? I don't know. Might be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he was. Look, he had already been getting pressures to do something, obviously, by Tywin Lannister, the new master of the master of ships. So I think there were certainly already pressures for him to act. I think it was more, and then of course Otto disagreed, but I think probably the general consensus was something's got to be done here. Um, and I think yeah, I think perhaps you could look at it as Alicent is almost making an appeal to him about family here. I think ultimately it came down to, does he want to see his brother die? Does he want to see his brother die fighting this, somewhat menial dispute? And I think ultimately that was kind of the appeal here of,
Okay.
he has another son with Alicent. He's going to have another. He has this growing family, and he almost, he doesn't want to he doesn't want to lose anyone. He doesn't want to lose any more of his family here. And so I think that's kind of what it came down to. He's an old softie. I think that's kind of what it was. You could distill out of this interaction. And I think also perhaps we're also setting up Alicent as more of a player, more of a political player, kind of laying the groundwork for that. And I think once we see in the next scene the aid that Viserys provides, it's not a lot. I mean, I think it's maybe 10,000 men, not a ton for from the royal army, from that he could. I mean, I'm sure he could raise an army far larger than that, and I think maybe 10 ships, 5 ships, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't feel any one way strongly, one way or another strongly, but.
Yeah, and I have no problem with the decision. I think the decision makes sense. I may just would have liked to see a more, kind of fleshed out scene there with Allison. Because I agree with you. I think that is kind of what they're trying to do here, and trying to make her kind of, more of a player, have a little bit more influence over Viserys. And we've seen that already as well, a little bit. But, yeah, anyways. So, just an amazing scene here when Daemon receives the message that Viserys is that he is providing the aid, that he's sending these men in the ships, and he almost beats this guy to death, the messenger, right, with the helmet. And I just thought this was so great. Again, you don't need dialogue in this scene, and exactly what I didn't know exactly how Daemon would react, but this just makes so much sense. Right when he started doing it, I'm like, yeah, like that just makes a lot of sense for that character. And again, you don't need him to say it. Like, him just doing that, exactly what's going on there. And it's just this, he's kind of, I at least took it as kind of, he's embarrassed, right? That now, his brother is coming to save him, and he wants no part in that. He doesn't want his help. He wants to do this, alone. And now with all this, these men coming, now it's going to be overshadowed, kind of his impact or his effect.
Yep.
So I'm assuming you also really like that scene as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what then that precipitates is him kind of, not hastily, but him serving as the decoy in this next kind of military maneuver, which I think, without that, you could say, oh, this seems a bit rushed. I mean, they've been here 3 years. Why didn't they just do this already? Right. But it's clearly because he doesn't want to wait for the crown's help. He wants the glory for himself. So it's now or never, basically. They'll be here very soon. I mean, they're it might be a week or something, but it will be soon. And he wants this now. He doesn't want to clearly be overshadowed by the royal army or any kind of aid that Viserys helps. So he's doing this now. So I thought it all just made perfect sense. And then obviously, like you said earlier, it just culminates in this really, really great scene sequence, I guess.
Well, and before we get to the sequence, the one thing too is, like, it almost seems like he'd rather die, pretty much, than have, like, Viserys help him.
That's right.
Because I mean, obviously, that scene when we're watching it, I at least was not thinking that he was gonna die there. He's a big character. We're gonna see a lot more of him. But in this situation, I mean, there's a high chance of him dying there. Like, if something goes wrong, with that plan, it's a very kind of risky maneuver, right? So that's at least what I got. He's literally willing to die. in order to avoid that happening. So, anyways, yeah, this ending sequence just crazy. I mean, this is just it was, you know what, you kind of did compare it to Battle of the Bastards. It almost did seem a little like that because we got a lot of the hand-to-hand combats, a lot of swords, some
Yep.
axes. That was really great. Was it Corliss
Yes.
with the
Yep.
axe? Kind of
Yep.
slashing and yeah, just really
Well, and
great, really great.
we get the same thing. I mean, John going one on one versus the
Right,
Bolton the Bolton army, and
right.
Damon going one on one here versus the Triarchy. Obviously, that
Yeah,
is very reminiscent of Battle of the Bastards. But
yeah.
yeah, and just the way it was done, it was very beautiful. Like cinematically, it was a very beautiful sequence to watch.
Yep, yep. And then we get, of course, the dragon, and you kind of fill me in that was Lenor. So that's the one that was
Right.
mentioned earlier in
Yes.
the episode, Corliss's son,
Yep.
who's riding that dragon. And it's they played it really well, right? Because they show the crab feeder. He keeps looking up, right? He keeps looking up to wait to see that dragon come over the hill. Um, and so they basically, I guess, wait till almost basically all the soldiers are out, and they really can't get back into the caves. And I think that, I guess, the other element of it too is that this dragon, who is Sea Smoke, right? Or that's what we kind of think.
Yeah. Sea smoke. Yep.
This dragon, Sea Smoke, obviously blends in better, with the clouds and with the sky and that the kind of atmosphere there than Caraxes being, very, you know, red and just kind of this odd looking dragon in himself. Where I think the Sea Smoke kind of blends in better. That's at least my impression of
Yeah.
what that was.
Yeah.
And so then he comes down and they kind of take out the archers with that dragon. So yeah, my first thought, I was a little uncomfortable. I was like, whoa, like who is this? Riding this dragon? That's not a Targaryen. Um, but yeah, I don't know. So do you want to maybe just explain that and what were your thoughts on the kind of the dragon sequence there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Laenor Valerian, obviously Corlys Valerian, Rhaenys Targaryen's son.
Right.
So being a half Targaryen,
Half. Yeah.
he was a dragon rider, and so we have not seen this yet to this point in the show, obviously, and I'm sure they did that intentionally. They wanted a bit of a shock factor there, but yeah, so he's a dragon rider. He has sea smoke. Not a huge dragon. I think kind of in the book, it's big enough for war, but certainly not as big as Caraxes or even Cyrax, Rhaenyra's dragon. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you one of your parents is a Targaryen, then you have Valyrian blood, you have the blood of the dragon. So in this universe, you have a high propensity to bond with a dragon. Certainly if you're given the dragon egg, or even in other scenarios where Targaryens have bonded with like Caraxes. Obviously, Caraxes was not an egg put in Daemon's crib. I believe Caraxes was initially bonded with their uncle, I believe. So it kind of varies. Some people are bonded with an egg. Some are take a dragon that is already like an adult dragon. It kind of just varies on person to person. But yeah, I mean, 17 dragons in the show. There's definitely not 17 people with the last name Targaryen, so we're gonna get
Right.
some half Targaryens here riding dragons.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and they did mention the one that doesn't have a rider, right? And they just they don't even know where it is. It's just kind of flying around free,
Vagar,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll see. I don't know actually how many more dragons we'll see this season. I'm sure as the show goes on, we'll probably see almost all of them.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This season we'll see much more, but yeah. So yeah, just an incredible ending sequence to end it. Then we see, of course, Daemon, kills the crab feeder, very, viciously kind of cuts him in half and drags him by the arm, his torso out. I kind of would have liked to see the little kind of hand-to-hand combat there. of him killing Crab Feeder, but I think we get the impression that it was pretty quick. I don't think it was much of a fight. And so that's, kind of why they did it that way, and him just kind of, carrying him out. But it was a great, just visual and a great way to end the episode. Anyways, so, okay, so just a couple kind of like nitpicks here before we get to our predictions for next episode. I do have kind of, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this too, but I have kind of noticed, more so in this episode, but a little bit in last episode too, it feels like we're getting a little, some of this dialogue just seems a little forced to me to emphasize these time jumps. And so, we get some of the dialogue in here. Oh, it's been this long, and, stuff like that. Which is definitely understandable. They have to do it somehow. But my kind of question is, I wonder if it maybe is just better if they just put it up on screen. I mean, before we start these episodes, like, 2 years later or something like that. And then maybe we don't have to have as much of this dialogue, to kind of give us the idea that time has passed. And also, a lot of these characters look the same. Not that they, should change that much, but they do look the same. So anyone who, if this dialogue wasn't there, I could definitely see you kind of struggling. Maybe not this episode with Aegon already born, but last episode, not much, happens in between there and to know the time jumps. So, I guess what are your thoughts on kind of the time jumps and how they're doing it so far?
Yeah, I don't really mind the kind of dialogue about it.
Okay.
Just personally, like I think I'll differ with you a bit there. I don't find it too forced. I mean, they say it a few times. I think obviously the fact that it's Aegon's second birthday, you can kind of discern from that it's been at least a couple years. Yeah, I haven't really minded it so far, to be honest with you. I mean, sure, they could do that at the beginning of the episode. They certainly could. I think what they've chosen to do though is kind of plant it throughout the episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they did it right at the beginning, and then maybe people might forget, and I think there are some points where it's relevant to bring up how many years it's been. So yeah, I don't really have an issue with it there. I think so far the time jumps to me have been fairly seamless. I think I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily like if every episode did 3 years, but
Right.
I think it's worked for me, to be honest with you, because I think we're kind of able to continue this story. We don't need to see the daily lives of these people. Like it does, I think, kind of work to do this. We can kind of see right away with Rhaenyra and Alicent that, like, probably immediately when they got married, the relationship deteriorated. So do we really need to see 3 years of the same thing?
No. Yeah. No. I agree with you there. Yeah.
So I think in that sense it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll get as many time jumps. I mean, we'll obviously probably get a pretty significant one after episode 5, but I think over the next 2 episodes, I don't think there'll be too much of a time jump. I think just trying to predict that based on the trailer that we're seeing for this next episode, which obviously we'll talk about in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like there'll be a huge time jump. At least that would be my prediction, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yep. Okay, and then just the one other thing is, Patty Constantine, I thought, did a great job in this scene too. We get this scene with Viserys at the fire when he's talking to Alicent. To me, this was, again, I kind of recognize what they were going for. Really want to comment Patty Constantine, but at the writing here is a little exposition-y to me. I really wanted to get into it, but it just seemed like, he was, and I guess he was drunk too. So, I mean, I guess that kind of forgives it. It kind of makes a little more sense there. But yeah, I don't know, just kind of a nitpick to me. I thought it was kind of, trying to explain, kind of give us more background on the Targaryens and kind of the tradition of that. And, I don't know. I just felt like it could have been, maybe, done in a better way or maybe just done without that scene. But that's just my opinion. But yeah. Any thoughts on that before we get to the predictions or anything else? Anything else that you noticed?
I mean, I enjoyed that scene too, but that could partially be just because I'm really into the kind of all the lore
Yeah.
and everything in the A Song of Ice and Fire canon. I enjoyed that. I like we kind of set it up in episode one. This dream he's had, the prophecy. I think that's interesting. Like I like that with the Targaryens. I think that's kind of an interesting interesting magical element, kind of fantasy element that they're bringing in. These kind of different dreamers and with the Targaryens, and these different people have had these prophecies in dreams.
Right.
So I thought I enjoyed the two, but like you said, I think also you can attribute it to is his drunkenness, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of say, well, maybe he's thinking about this, but clearly he's had a long day, people badgering him all day about who's there, and then he gets really drunk, and then now he's kind of just spewing his kind of inner dialogue. So I mean, I enjoyed it personally, but sure, I mean, I would understand if it felt a little bit exposition-y and a little bit in the weeds of Targaryenism.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yep, for sure. So, yeah. Overall, though, a really great episode again. I don't think there's been any, weak moments or any kind of sequences that have been bad, really, in the first 3 episodes here. So yeah, really impressed so far. All right, so let's just end off with the predictions for next episode. But I have to say, I don't really have that many because I think we talked about this before, but this teaser really didn't show much. Whereas the teaser for this episode, I think actually showed a lot, including this whole like battle sequence that played out. Or kind of showed that it was going to happen. But this one, other than, I think we see Daemon back at King's Landing. So I'm really looking forward to those scenes, especially we see, I think, one with him and Viserys. Yeah, really looking forward to that. And then the other thing that stuck out to me about the preview was that Caraxes, it looks like, is attacking a ship of some kind. So I'm not sure. And I'm not sure the banner on that ship. Did you catch that?
I did not. I'd have to rewatch it.
Okay, I thought it was maybe the Lannisters. I thought that's maybe what it was. But I could be wrong. So anyways, those are kind of just the 2 things that I took out of it. What did you catch, and what are you looking forward to in this next episode?
Couple things. There's also Otto Hightower. There's we hear him talk about like these horrible rumors about a character. I'm pretty sure I know what that is. I won't say because obviously it's not necessarily clear or in the show, but just based on what I know. And we also see looking like Storm's End is going to be in this episode, the seat of House Baratheon. So potentially we get some interest there. I'm not sure what that would necessarily be. But yeah, and we get Daemon looking like he's crowning himself.
Yeah.
Also interesting. Just being the showman that he is, walking into the throne room wearing a crown. Also, he has a haircut. Not that necessarily portends anything, but thought that was interesting. So, could that indicate a time jump? Perhaps. I don't know. I really don't think it'll be that long of a time jump. I think it very well could be a few months, but I don't think it'll be multiple years. I could be wrong. Yeah. But yeah, not a lot, but it looks very intrigued.
Yep. I'm forgetting the title of this one. I think it's King of the Narrow Sea. I believe that's the title.
Yep.
So yeah, obviously, that's referring to Daemon. So yeah, really looking forward to what that has in store, what that entails. So, anyways, so yeah, thanks, Greg, for joining me on this episode again.
My pleasure.
And yeah, so that just about does it. Thank you guys for watching this one. Obviously, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments. And yeah, so we'll be back next week for House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 4. Looking forward to it. And yeah, so we'll see you then next week for the episode.